There is a particular kind of exhaustion that has nothing to do with being tired. You know the one. You wake up, and before you've done a single thing, there's already this weight. Not dread, exactly. Not sadness, exactly. Something more like flatness. Like you are walking through your own life slightly out of sync with it. Watching it happen, but not quite in it. And the strange thing is, you can't point to what's wrong. You have things, you've built things, be most measures, including your own, you should be fine. Maybe you are fine, but fine and alive are not the same thing. At some point you started doing the things you thought you were supposed to do, and somewhere in the doing of them, you lost the thread. You lost the sense that any of it was chosen, that any of it was yours. And now you're here, maybe wondering whether what you need is a change, or a break, or a completely different life, or maybe just wondering, now, if that feeling has crossed into something heavier, something that has genuinely stopped you from getting out of bed, from functioning, from feeling anything at all, that is a different kind of weight, and there is real support for it. But for most people watching this, the feeling I'm describing is something else. It's not clinical, it's philosophical, and philosophical problems, it turns out, have a different kind of answer. Here's what I want to talk to you about today. The idea of starting again, not the fantasy version, not the one where you quit everything, move somewhere beautiful, and become someone new. The actual version, the quieter, harder, more honest version. Because starting again is not what we think it is, and most people who need it most are afraid of the wrong things about it. We have a deeply misleading story about what it means to begin again. The story goes like this. Starting over is failure. It means something went wrong. It means you picked the wrong path, wasted time, maybe wasted years, and now you're back at zero. Worse than zero, because now you're older. And the people around you have kept moving forward, which means you haven't just stopped, you've fallen behind. That story is almost entirely wrong, but it's persistent because it's built on something that feels true. The idea that life is a linear progression. Staircase. Each step is supposed to build on the last one, and the goal is to keep climbing. If you go back down a step, or change staircases entirely, something has gone wrong. But life is not a staircase. Not for most people. Not really. It's much more like a river system branching, rejoining, sometimes pooling in stillness before moving again. And the question was never whether you'd have to navigate. The question was whether you'd do it with your eyes open or closed. Here's the reframe I want to offer you. Starting again is not a retreat. It is a renegotiation. What you are renegotiating is the contract between you and your own life. The terms you accepted, or that were handed to you when you were younger, less experienced, less honest with yourself. Most of us are living, at least in part, by agreements we never consciously made. We inherited them from parents, absorbed them from culture, adopted them because they looked like certainty when we needed certainty. Starting again means sitting down with those old agreements and asking, do I still sign this? Do I, knowing what I know now, still choose? That's not failure. That's one of the most adult things a person can do. There's a concept in economics called sunk cost. You've probably heard of it. The idea is that once you've invested time, money, or energy into something, you feel psychologically compelled to keep investing, even when the rational choice is to stop. Because stopping feels like acknowledging that the past investment was wasted. But here's what doesn't get said enough. Sunk cost isn't just a financial fallacy. It's an existential one. People stay in careers for years past the point they stopped caring, not because they love the work, but because they have given so much to it. They stay in versions of themselves they've outgrown, not because that version still fits, but because changing would mean admitting that who they were at 22 no longer applies. The philosopher Kierkegaard wrote about what he called the aesthetic mode of life, a way of being where you move from experience to experience, always chasing something fresh, because the alternative feels like stagnation. But he also warned about the opposite trap, the person who has stopped chasing, who has settled into a kind of comfortable numbness, and calls it maturity. What Kierkegaard understood is that the enemy of a meaningful life isn't failure or difficulty. It's calcification, the slow hardening of the self into a shape you chose too early and never questioned again. The cost of not starting again is not dramatic. It doesn't announce itself. It accumulates quietly. A little less curiosity each year. A little more performance of a self that stopped being fully true a long time ago. And one day, maybe today, you look up and realize that, somewhere along the way, you stopped being the author of your life and became a character in someone else's story. Or worse, a character in a story nobody is even telling anymore. Starting again is, at its core, a refusal to calcify. It's the decision to remain a living, a bulbing thing, rather than a monument to choices made in a different chapter. In many philosophical traditions, there's a concept of the threshold, a liminal space, from the Latin limen, meaning the place between, the doorway that is neither inside nor outside, the in-between. And here's what's rarely said about thresholds. Most people don't get stuck on the wrong side of the door. They get stuck in the doorway itself, because the doorway is actually the most emotionally complex place to be. You can see what you're leaving. You can sense what might be ahead. And you're standing in neither, which means you carry both. The grief of what you're releasing and the uncertainty of what hasn't arrived yet. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps and went on to build an entire psychology of meaning from that experience, spent much of his life demonstrating a single idea that the last and most irreducible human freedom is the freedom to choose how you respond to what happens to you. There's a line that circulates under his name, that between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space lies our freedom. Whether those are exactly his words is something scholars debate, but the idea is unmistakably his, lived out under conditions most of us will never face. And it points to something important. The pause between what happens to you and what you do next is not empty. It is where your character is made. Most productivity culture wants to eliminate that pause. Move fast. Decide quickly. Optimize. But Frankl's life pointed to something almost opposite, that the pause itself is where human dignity lives. The not yet, the threshold. When you are standing at the threshold of starting again, you are not failing to move. You are in the space, and that space is not empty. It is full of the most important question you can ask yourself. What do I actually value? Not what you've been rewarded for. Not what you've performed. What you value in your body, in your gut, when nobody is watching and no one is applauding. Marcus Aurelius returned to this territory repeatedly in the Meditations. The idea that your power does not live in your circumstances, your reputation, or the outcomes you can control. It lives in your mind, and in how you meet the moment. Book 6 keeps returning to it. What is outside you is not yours, but your response always is. That's not detachment. That is not the popular misreading, the don't care about anything version of Stoicism. It's something more demanding than that. It's the discipline of placing your energy precisely where it can actually move something. Starting again is how you exercise that discipline. Here's something worth sitting with. You can't actually start from zero. And I don't mean that in the discouraging way. I mean it in the precise, honest, liberating way. When you start again, at anything, at any age, under any circumstances, you bring everything. You bring the scar tissue and the knowledge, the failed experiments and the unexpected skills, the relationships that shaped you and the mistakes you finally understand. You bring your entire history as raw material. This is what distinguishes starting again from starting for the first time. The first time, you had energy and naivety and time. Starting again, you have something rarer. You know more about yourself than you did. You have made enough wrong turns to recognize a few of them earlier now. You have learned, probably the hard way, what actually matters to you, because you've tested your assumptions against reality and felt where they broke. Albert Camus wrote, in one of the stranger and more clarifying arguments in modern philosophy, that we must imagine Sisyphus happy. You know the myth Sisyphus, condemned to roll a boulder up a hill for eternity, watching it roll back down, climbing again, forever. Camus was not being ironic. His point was that, in the act of descending the hill, in the walk back down before the next attempt, Sisyphus is fully conscious of his situation. He sees it completely, and in that scene, he is not crushed by it. He owns it. The absurdity doesn't disappear, but it does not own him. Starting again is your walk back down the hill. It's the moment between the end of one attempt and the beginning of the next. And it's in that walk, how you do it, what you carry, what you choose to see, that the real story gets written. So when you hear starting again and feel the weight of it, the grief, the fear, the uncertainty, know that that weight is not evidence you're doing something wrong. It's evidence you're doing something real. Weightless beginnings are fantasies. Real ones have gravity. I want to leave you with something different from the usual set of reflection questions. Instead of 3 things to ask yourself, I want to offer you one thing to notice. Just one. In the next few days, pay attention to the moments when you feel even faintly more alive. Not happy necessarily. Not productive. Just present. Interested. Slightly more like yourself. It might be a conversation, a project, a walk. Something you read, a problem you were actually engaged with rather than just moving through. Notice it. Don't analyze it yet. Don't build a plan around it. Just notice that it happened, and that it felt different from the flatness. Because most people who need to start again don't lack courage. They lack a clear enough signal about what direction actually calls to them. And those small moments of aliveness, quiet, easy to dismiss, easy to explain away, are the signal. They are pointing at something, and they are pointing at something true. You don't have to blow your life up to follow them. You just have to stop pretending they aren't there. Remember where we started? Flatness, that walking through your life slightly out of sync with it. That exhaustion that has nothing to do with being tired. I want to say something about that feeling directly, because I think it gets misread almost universally. People treat it as a symptom of something wrong with them. Laziness, maybe, or ingratitude, or weakness. But that feeling, that particular kind of quiet disconnection, is not a flaw. It is information. It is your life in the most honest language available to it, telling you that the current terms are no longer right for you, that the version of yourself you've been running is due for an honest look. Starting again is not about erasing what came before. It is about refusing to let what came before be the final word. You are not the sum of your wrong turns. You are not the job title, the relationship status, the achievement record, or the quiet disappointment you've been carrying. You are the person still asking the question. And that matters more than it probably feels like it does right now. The path forward is rarely obvious, but it almost always begins with a single, honest act. Deciding to stop pretending the current arrangement is enough when you know it isn't. You don't need a perfect plan. You don't need certainty. You don't need to have it figured out. You just need to be willing to begin. Take care of yourself, and I'll see you on the next one.